When I was 21, 42, and 66, I went to the Bureau of Vital Statistics to find out about my adoption. In between those years, I occasionally attended meetings at a group called Adoptees in Search. The group was made up of people who had been adopted or who had given up a child for adoption. The purpose of the group was mutual support, but also to share information about how one might use libraries, census records, social security system, and other means to gather tidbits of information that might eventually be brought together to help one find the relatives that one was looking for. Unfortunately, it didn't work very well. It required dogged determination, lots and lots of research, and luck. Many tried, few succeeded. None of this would have been necessary if Colorado had been like many other states at that time. Those would be the states that allowed adoptees to access their birth records at the age of 21. But no, not Colorado. In Colorado, it pretty much required a court order, and they were hard to come by. But at age 66, I engaged an attorney, and we petitioned the Denver Juvenile Court for a court order. Luckily, the petition was honored, and with court order in hand, I hustled back to the Bureau of Vital Statistics one last time, and within about 2 weeks, I had in my hands all the documents that I'd waited for all those years. As I read, it said, name, Michael David Cassady. Father's name, Neal Leon Cassady. There it was, verification in black and white. Well, this information prompted a lot of thoughts. You know, the what-if thoughts and the if-only thoughts, and questions such as, what did it imply to me that it was Neal Cassady and not John Doe, your average citizen, who was my father? That's something to think about. Something else that I've thought quite a bit about is how am I similar and how am I different from my father? Well, I'm different in many ways, and I'm similar in at least three. One way that I'm similar was the use of mood and mind-altering chemicals. Another way that I'm similar was the pursuit of cheap thrills. And the third way is creative expression. I'm not going to bore you with a list of the drugs I've taken. I suspect many of you have lists of your own, don't you? And cheap thrills, well, among those was driving fast. I used to like to drive fast, but I think maybe I made more mistakes driving fast than my father did, but maybe not. Before I slowed down, I'd crashed 13 cars and 3 motorcycles. One night I slammed into a moving train. Now that was a mistake. Something I became aware of years ago was that if I could put at least 2 of these kind of areas that I've been talking about together into one activity, well, that activity was likely to be more interesting, exciting, or intense. For example, when I drove my 49 Ford 100 miles an hour, well, it became a whole lot more intense when I was loaded. And when I took daylight photographs of nude women at a cemetery, well, that creative expression was thrilling because, well, they were nude, and we weren't supposed to be doing that. So tonight, I'm going to read a story from my book. The story's about a friend of mine and his tattoo. I should say the story might be a little too intense for the more squeamish amongst us. Tattoo 72. I wish I didn't have these, Hank said, pointing to 2 tattoos on his right forearm. This wasn't the first time that Hank told me he didn't like those decorations. Now and then, when talking about his ex-wife or his tour in the Navy, he bemoaned having them. Hank had several tattoos on his upper arms in addition to the 2 that he didn't like on his forearm. They were souvenirs obtained in various Southeast Asian seaports. Hank had served on an aircraft carrier catapult crew aboard the USS Ranger during the Vietnam conflict. Usually his tattoos were acquired at intervals between time spent in one bar or another while on shore leave. As many know, shore leave often resulted in unwanted consequences, and occasionally tattoos were counted among them. One of Hank's unwanted tattoos flaunted a question mark inside of a red-colored heart. The heart was flanked between 2 smaller red hearts, and all 3 were outlined with dark blue ink. The other tattoo was the name of his ex-wife, written in a cursive style. The heart tattoo is bad enough, Hank said, but the other one? He stopped talking and finished his statement with a facial expression that left no doubt as to his opinion. The tattoo Andrea covered an area of about 1/2 inch by 2 inches and was written in dark blue ink also. It wasn't offensive or even very noticeable, but for Hank, that patch of skin with those 6 letters might just as well have been a neon sign that flashed objectionable messages about his ex-wife. "Can you get it removed by a doctor?" I asked. "Yeah," Hank said. "They take it off and then graft skin onto the spot from another part of your body, and it costs a lot of money." I heard about another way Hank added. You rub the tattoo with fine sand until your skin gets red and sore. You let it heal for a few weeks, and then you rub it again with sand. Do this for a long time, maybe years, and the tattoo is worn away. "Really?" I said. "Well, I guess that could work." "Can you see me rubbing sand on my arm that way?" Hank asked. No, I said. "Yeah," Hank said as he walked to the self-serve bar to buy another round. We'd been at Lane's Tavern on West Colfax for several hours, taking advantage of 25-cent draws. There wasn't a bar that served cheaper beer, or if there was, we didn't know about it. Hank and I had planned to load up on cheap drinks and then go to Mr. Lucky's or another one of the many bars and nightclubs located in the Glendale section of Metro Denver. When Hank returned with the 2 drafts, he had also brought shots of tequila. Hank and I could drink and talk for hours, actually sometimes days. We'd shared a lot of experiences, and we had a rapport that was rooted in comparable social values and an appreciation for irreverent humor. Eventually, our conversation came around to our ex-wives, and before long, once again, we were talking about Hank's tattoos, specifically Andrea. "I'll take it off," I wisecracked. "How?" Hank asked. "I'll cut it out with a straight razor," I replied, still joking. "Can you really cut it out?" Hank asked. I hesitated, wondering if I could. "I'll go get another round," I said. When I returned to the table with more drinks, we resumed talking about Andrea and removing Andrea from Hank's arm. The conversation took many tangents and prompted a considerable amount of impudent laughter, but eventually Hank asked if I truly thought I could get rid of the tattoo. "And how?" "You are serious," I said. "Well, maybe I can." By then, we decided not to go to another bar. Instead, we stayed at Lane's and formulated a plan for attempting this operation. We left Lane's and drove back to the duplex we were renting, and all the while laughing and talking about amputating Andrea from Hank's arm. Back home, our preparations for surgery began by opening a quart of Hornitos tequila, which I had bought for a special occasion while on a recent trip to Juarez, Mexico. We were in utter agreement that this was a special occasion because Hank had to be properly anesthetized, and I needed to calm my nerves for the cutting ahead. So Hank ripped a clean white sheet into assorted size pieces, and I boiled a straight razor. Then we arranged the razor, cloth, sterile gauze pads, adhesive tape, paper towel, and ammonia inhalants in neat order on the kitchen table. At about 4 a.m., we were ready. I eyeballed the contents of the tequila bottle. It was 2/3 empty, which provoked one more irreverent guffaw from the surgeon and patient. It was time to begin the procedure. First, it seemed practical to score a relatively deep rectangular boundary around the tattoo in order to clearly define the skin to be removed and to create a guide so as not to slice away unnecessary tissue. Next, I began a process of slicing and peeling away just the right thickness of unwanted ink-stained skin. The site didn't bleed much at first, but soon it became necessary to frequently swab the area. If I didn't dab the wound every few seconds, it was impossible to see what I was cutting. At this point, we realized that there wasn't enough cloth to sop up the blood, so I switched to paper towel in order to save the remaining strips of cloth for bandaging. I worked fast, stopping only to take a few snapshots. Surgery took about 5 minutes, and I removed the tattoo in one piece. Hank and I had another couple of slugs from the tequila bottle, which he unsuccessfully tried to stop the persistent seepage of blood. Hank applied pressure to the wound, and I carefully smoothed out the piece of skin that had been indelibly marked a few years earlier by a tattoo artist on the other side of the world. We looked at it one last time. Andrea was still readable, but the skin had started to shrivel without Hank's arm and blood to provide a foundation and nourishment. Eventually, the blood leakage slowed a little, and we applied a gauze bandage and then several layers of cloth. Hank's arm continued to ooze blood for 3 more days before finally clotting. He experienced some pain, but no infection. After his arm healed, we saw that the tattoo had been completely removed except for 2 small dark blue dots where ink had reached deeper layers of tissue. Although some people may have thought the scar was less attractive than the tattoo, Hank and I considered the operation a success. So, if you'd like a copy of my book, as Mark thoughtfully said, it's available at various places, but of course I have them here tonight. Instead of $15, they're $10. One last thing. Last year, Westward magazine published a feature article about my life. On the cover is a drawing of Neal Cassady, and the article really connects me to my father. The title of the article is "The Beat Goes On," and so it does, evidenced by all of us here tonight. So keep the beat, and thanks for listening.